Okay, so let's dive in. Imagine this. A small boat, really it's just a yacht, sailing across the Mediterranean. On board about a dozen people. And, among them, a prominent activist you've definitely heard of, Greta Thunberg, plus a French lawmaker.
Right.
Their stated goal was, well, to sail right into Gaza, challenging a naval blockade, delivering aid. It sounds dramatic.
And it absolutely was. This wasn't some story. It happened just recently, and it blew up pretty quickly into an international incident.
Yeah, drawing really sharp, conflicting reactions.
And the way this whole thing is reported, how it's framed by the different sides, it just reveals so much, about the conflict dynamics, the battle over the narrative.
Totally. Well, one side is calling a, quote, peaceful act of civil resistance.
The other side immediately dismisses as a media provocation, or, even calls it the selfie yacht.
Exactly. That huge difference in perspective, that's why we're doing this deep dive today. We're looking at the BBC News and CNN reports he shared with us, really trying to unpack the events of June 9th surrounding this yacht, the Madleen. So our mission here is to explore these, well, wildly different accounts you see in the sources, and crucially, place the incident in the context of the, frankly, dire aid situation in Gaza.
Yeah, that context is key.
And we'll look at the international reaction and try to pull out the key insights. What helps us understand what's really going on here, maybe beyond just the headlines?
Okay, so let's start maybe with the vessel itself and what its mission was supposed to be. The sources identify it as the Madleen. Apparently, it was also known as the Barcarolle, and it's a UK-flagged yacht.
Right, and that UK flagging, that definitely becomes relevant later when we get to the international reactions.
Yeah.
So the journey was put together by the Freedom Flotilla Coalition, the FFC. And their whole purpose, really, is to defy the Israeli blockade and get humanitarian aid into Gaza.
Now, about that aid, the sources are pretty specific. They keep describing it using terms like a small quantity or a meager cargo.
Yeah, symbolic amount was another one I saw.
Exactly. Symbolic, we're talking things like rice, some baby formula, other food, medical supplies. It was never, intended as some massive aid shipment.
Which seems as it was part of the point, right?
Lovely.
The symbolism.
Precisely.
And who was on board. 12 people total. So besides Greta Thunberg, there was a French lawmaker. The group also had citizens from France, actually 6 French citizens, including a French Palestinian MEP.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and then others from Brazil, Spain, and Turkey.
Okay. And they set sail from Catania in Italy, beginning of June. One source said June 1st, another June 3rd. Either way, early June, heading towards Gaza.
Which, well, pretty predictably led straight to the interception. And this happened early on June 9th.
And right away, even where it happened becomes a point of disagreement. The BBC says it was near the Egyptian coast. But the FFC and this legal center, Adala, they strongly claim it was actually in international waters.
And that difference, that location, is absolutely critical from a legal standpoint, isn't it?
Oh, completely.
Did the sources you looked at give any sense of why that's so central to the FFC's argument, the international waters claim?
They do, yeah. It's basically fundamental to their argument that the whole interception was illegal and unlawful boarding, as they put it.
Right.
Now, Israel's side of the story, as presented in the sources, is quite different. They say their forces intercepted the boat safely. They'd warned it, apparently via radio, saying the maritime zone off Gaza was closed.
All right.
And their foreign ministry is quoted calling these kinds of unauthorized attempts to breach the blockade dangerous, unlawful, and claiming they undermine ongoing humanitarian efforts. The defense minister had told the IDF, basically, make sure it doesn't reach Gaza.
So Israel's framing it as, a legitimate action. Necessary security measure within a closed zone, not stopping real aid. But the activist account from the FFC, it's dramatically different.
Totally different picture.
They claim the Israeli military attacked them, unlawfully boarded the Madleen, again stressing international waters. They reported some pretty jarring details too, like quadcopters swarming the ship.
Yeah, I read that.
Spraying some white paint-like stuff that apparently got in one activist's eyes, communications jammed, and even disturbing sounds being played over the radio.
Wow, yeah. And the sources mention there's video footage from a camera on the boat provided by the FFC, apparently showing the moment of boarding.
That contrast is just It's key, isn't it? One side says calm professional interdiction. The other alleges a hostile attack, an unlawful abduction, basically, in international waters.
Exactly. And the insight there, I think, is just how fast the event gets translated into these opposing legal and moral claims. Each side picks the details that back up its story, trying to control how people see it right from the start.
Right. It's not just reporting, it's immediate spin. And the aftermath reinforces that. The FFC said they lost contact with the boat for like 19 hours.
19 hours, yeah.
Claiming the crew was forcibly abducted, experiencing psychological impacts. Meanwhile, Israel's foreign ministry just says, oh, the passengers are getting medical checks to make sure they're okay.
Yeah.
Very routine sounding.
Which then brings us to the next phase. The boat being taken to Israel, specifically to the port of Ashdod.
And Israel's foreign ministry described this by saying the boat was continuing its journey toward an Israeli port, which,
That's putting quite a spin on a forced redirection, yeah.
Quite the spin. Anyway, it arrived, docked in Ashdod on the evening of June 9th, and the Israeli foreign ministry actually released images, pictures, showing the boat docked, and specifically photos of Greta Thunberg and someone else. One picture shows her in front of an Israeli flag. Another shows her being offered a sandwich and water. Those image choices, they feel very deliberate.
Oh, absolutely. They seem designed to project this image of, standard procedure, almost benign, hospitality even, on arrival, directly countering the FFC's narrative of abduction and trauma. And regarding how the activists were treated once they arrived, the Israeli Foreign Ministry confirmed the medical exams. But then the defense minister, Israel Katz, added this other layer.
What was that?
He claimed the activists were taken to a room to be shown a horror film documenting the October 7 massacre, but that they refused to watch it.
Wow, that's a pretty striking claim to insert into the official account.
It is. And Israel's plan for the activists was also pretty clear from the sources. Basically arranged for them to go back to their home countries. Deportation was the plan.
Okay. And what about the aid itself, that small amount of rice and formula?
Well, predictably, that follows the same pattern of conflicting stories. The Israeli government spokesman, David Mencer, said the yacht had a meager cargo, but, quote, of course it will be sent into Gaza. The foreign ministry echoed that, saying Israel would transfer the goods through humanitarian channels. But the FFC claimed the cargo was confiscated.
So even the simplest outcome, what happened to the supplies, is disputed. This whole cycle, event, counter-event, wildly different descriptions. It leads us right into how the whole incident got framed, doesn't it? Israel's selfie yacht versus the FFC saying they were kidnapped.
Yeah, Israel really hammered that selfie yacht angle. They kept using terms like that, or so-called celebrities, prominent activists. They explicitly called the mission a media provocation just to get publicity, saying things like, there are ways to deliver aid to the Gaza Strip. They do not involve Instagram selfies. That government spokesman, Mencer, even asked, who is really feeding Gaza and who is feeding their own ego?
Oof.
And Defense Minister Katz went further, accusing Thunberg and the crew of ignoring Hamas atrocities, closing their eyes to the truth.
It's a clear strategy, isn't it? Undermine the activists' legitimacy by questioning their motives, making them seem unserious.
Definitely. And on the flip side, the FFC framed their mission as a peaceful act of civil resistance against what they consistently call the illegal Israeli blockade.
And Greta Thunberg herself, in that pre-recorded video they played after losing contact.
Yeah, what did she say?
She said, if you see this video, we have been intercepted and kidnapped in international waters by the Israeli occupational forces, or forces that support Israel. The FFC just kept stating their goal is to end the illegal Israeli blockade of Gaza.
And what's really fascinating there, I think the insight is seeing how both sides immediately jump to framing that delegitimizes the other side. Israel attacks the activists' motives, self-interest, attention-seeking, not really about aid, while the FFC attacks the legality and morality of Israel's actions, kidnapped, illegal blockade, painting Israel as the aggressor violating international law. It's just this intense, concentrated battle for public opinion using these really loaded labels.
You saw some media analysis, like for the BBC's Jeremy Bowen, sort of acknowledging that, yeah, the boat was probably never going to actually reach Gaza. The mission was designed to stir up controversy and debate. The symbolism was the main point.
Right. But this intentional provocation, it really needs to be seen against that much broader and frankly deeply concerning context. The humanitarian situation inside Gaza itself.
Absolutely.
The sources point out that Israel imposed a a full humanitarian blockade of Gaza way back on March 2nd. So that was, 11 weeks before this yacht incident, roughly a 3-month blockade.
And even though some limited aid started getting in again in late May, the sources all describe it as just a trickle, a tiny fraction of what was getting in before the war.
And Israel, along with the U.S., has been pushing aid distribution through this new system, the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, or GHF.
But here's where that context gets really, really stark. Humanitarian groups, they widely condemned this GHS system. The UN's human rights chief, Volker Turk, gave this absolutely grim assessment.
Yeah.
He said Palestinians face the grimmest of choices.
Yeah.
Die from starvation or risk being killed while trying to access the meager food that is being made available. And the BBC's Jeremy Bowen, he described the GHF distribution as chaotic, repeatedly breaking down into a total free-for-all. Apparently, the GHF itself has even paused operations sometimes because it's just too crowded and unsafe.
And tragically, the sources also mention deadly incidents happening near these GHF aid points. At least 4 Palestinians reportedly killed by Israeli gunfire recently, just trying to get food. Dozens killed over the past week trying to get aid from these sites.
It's horrific. The UN actually warned the GHF distribution system has become a death trap.
A death trap. That context, it provides such a crucial insight, doesn't it?
It really does.
If the official aid channels are being described like that chaotic, dangerous, insufficient, a trickle, a death trap, well, it offers a powerful reason why activists might feel they have to do these kinds of risky, high-profile things, like this flotilla.
Even if it's symbolic.
Exactly. Even if it's symbolic, even if it can't logistically solve the aid crisis itself, it highlights the sheer desperation that's fueling these unconventional efforts.
Yeah. The overall picture, the head of the International Committee of the Red Cross called Gaza worse than hell on earth. A UN-backed report back in April warned 1 in 5 people were facing starvation. CNN said aid hangs by a thread amid looting and starvation.
And the FFC, for their part, just keeps saying aid is desperately needed, and they accuse Israel of genocide, which, of course, Israel constantly denies. But that's the incredibly volatile backdrop for this Madleen incident.
So given all that, how did the rest of the world react? The sources detailed quite a few responses from different countries and organizations.
Yeah, France was quite prominent, obviously, having several citizens on board. President Macron asked for their swift return. The French Foreign Ministry was talking to Israel. But interestingly, the sources note France had actually warned the activists beforehand about the risks. Yet, they still called for immediate, large-scale, unhindered humanitarian aid access to Gaza.
That's a nuanced position, isn't it? Acknowledging the risks the activists took, but still hammering the need for more aid.
Definitely. Turkey came out strongly, condemning the interception as a heinous attack in international waters. Sweden's foreign ministry said they were in contact with Israel about Thunberg, looking into consular support.
And the UK government, since the boat was UK flagged.
Right. Downing Street said they wanted the situation resolved safely with restraint, in line with international humanitarian law. They also stated pretty clearly that the humanitarian situation in Gaza is appalling and intolerable, and more aid must get in, called unimpeded aid access critical.
Okay.
And others. The Palestinian Foreign Ministry called for the activists' safety to be protected. Hamas condemned the interception, flagrant violation of international law, attack on civilian volunteers, demanded immediate release.
100 lines from them, perhaps.
Pretty much. Then you had the UN Special Rapporteur on Human Rights in the occupied Palestinian territories, Francesca Albanese. She took a more provocative stance.
Also,
she specifically asked for more ships to sail together with aid, and she urged the UK government, because of the flagging, to demand clarification and the immediate release of the boat and crew.
Right, and human rights groups like Amnesty International also weighed in quite heavily.
Yeah, they called the flotilla mission itself an indictment of the international community for failing to end the blockade. They stressed Israel's international obligation to ensure aid access, saying its actions show chilling contempt for international law.
And Amnesty's leader, Agnes Callamard, made a strong point too.
What was that?
She said activists wouldn't have had to risk their lives like this if Israel's allies had acted more forcefully to begin with.
That's a powerful critique. And the insight here, I think, across these international reactions is how often they loop back. Even if they acknowledge the activists' risks or methods were debatable, they loop back to the core issues: aid access, the legality, the morality of the blockade itself. Many statements end up reinforcing that demand for greater humanitarian access.
And then there's the specific legal angle. Aidallah, that legal center for Arab minority rights in Israel, they took action. sent an urgent letter demanding info on the activists, where they were, their legal status, access to lawyers, said they'd pursue legal action.
And their core legal argument, according to the sources, hinges on Israel having no jurisdiction to seize the ship in international waters, and they argued the Madleen was actually headed towards, quote, the territorial waters of the state of Palestine.
Which clashes directly with Israel's position.
Exactly. Israel's position is, we were preventing entry into the Gaza Strip in accordance with international law, citing that closed maritime zone. That's the fundamental legal standoff the sources highlight.
And it's worth remembering, as the sources point out, this Madleen yacht wasn't the only recent attempt to challenge the situation. There was that separate convoy mentioned.
Oh, yeah, from Tunisia.
Yeah, about 1,000 people in 9 buses leaving Tunisia, aiming to break the siege on Gaza, trying to get to Rafah, though facing potential issues getting through Egypt.
And the Madleen wasn't even the first FFC vessel recently involved in something like this. Remember the other one, the Conscience?
Right, the one that allegedly came under a drone attack off Malta?
Yeah, allegedly. The sources are careful to note it was an FFC claim. No proof the drone was Israeli, and Israel wouldn't comment. But interestingly, Greta Thunberg was apparently supposed to board that vessel, the Conscience, in Malta before it continued on.
Huh. Okay. And there were other reactions too, right? Closer to the scene.
Yeah, a small protest actually formed in Ashdod before the Madleen even arrived. People with signs, Palestinian flags, demanding an end to the attacks and the blockade. Apparently, it got interrupted by some critical passerby, according to the sources. And then, maybe one of the most widely reported individual comments came from former U.S. President Donald Trump.
Oh boy, what did he say?
He called Greta Thunberg strange and a young, angry person. Recommended she take an anger management class.
Okay.
And then added that Israel has enough problems without kidnapping Greta Thunberg.
Wow. That comment manages to touch on both framings, doesn't it? Israel's view of her as a provocateur and the activist view of her being kidnapped.
It really does. It kind of highlights just how much this specific incident, and maybe Thunberg's involvement in particular, really cut through the noise and got reactions from all over the political map.
So, okay. We've really dug into this Madleen incident from, well, a lot of angles. The journey, that dramatic and very disputed interception, the arrival in Israel, and just the vastly different ways it's been seen, framed, and reacted to by governments, activists, individuals, and all of this, as we've kept stressing, set against that truly desperate humanitarian backdrop in Gaza, where the official aid channels face such severe criticism, even being called, dangerous death traps.
Yeah, this deep dive into the sources, it just powerfully shows how these complex, high-stakes situations get instantly filtered through these dramatically different lenses, doesn't it?
It really does.
It shows the intensity of the debate around aid to Gaza and the lengths activists will go to grab attention, even if their methods are symbolic, maybe controversial. These conflicting accounts of the exact same event, they aren't just like small factual disagreements. They feel like deliberate narrative choices designed to shape how you, the public, understand it all and where you place your support.
So as you process all this information we discussed, maybe consider what these contrasting accounts and reactions reveal. Not just about this one specific event, the Madleen incident, but about that wider struggle. The struggle to control narratives, to control access in conflict zones today, when literally every detail from the exact location of an intersection on the water to what happened to a box of baby formula, when that becomes a point of intense dispute, what does that tell us about the challenge? The challenge of finding any kind of shared truth, let alone finding solutions in such an incredibly polarized environment.